Hello everyone, thank you for showing up. Tonight we're going to be discussing more Java CS187 NMSU grants. And before we get started, do we have any questions pertaining to anything that we've been working on or questions in general? Let's make sure I can see the window. Okay, good. All right, so last week we worked on a bit of a refresher, looking at more if statements, programming methodology, and went over questions. I do want to go over this module, which is offering a little bit of chaos or confusion. And that's discussing or dealing with Chapter 7 assignment. So if you look at the Chapter 7 assignment, number 1 obviously is shortcuts, easy enough, which increase productivity, and that's important. Let me go ahead and slide this over here and we can share this screen. Okay, so I got 2 screens. I might as well make use of it. I don't have to clutter you guys. Okay, so the second part says download the reading image main and NMSU PNG file, and that is located over here in files. And then in source code, chapter 7, and notice you have the PNG file as well as the reading image main PDF. Now, if you take a look at this, I've already written the bulk of the code for you required for the assignment. Obviously, you need to change this. And if you notice, the code is here with 3 complete numbers. This complete, complete here, and complete here. This is what you will be incorporating or adding into the program to make it work using the file right here, this NMSU PNG. So download both of these. You will be required to hand code this. I did make it a PDF file so that you do have to do it manually, and then complete those 3 functions. Once you do, you will run the program, and through that program you will then have access to the output, which will be a new image based on the NMSU file. Once you look at the image, you'll see what it did. There is one error in there, or not really an error, but a bug, let's say, that requires you to solve it real quick. It's a pretty simple bug, and it will adjust your image. That is the first project. You will need to take send me the new image that it generates. And then the second part, if we go ahead and go back to the assignments for 7, or the third part, however you'd like to look at it, chapter 7 assignment is, so it tells you to debug the code, and once you found the error, correct it and comment the issue so that I know how you corrected it. So not only do you need to find it, but you need to add a comment that says, this is what I did. Next, you're going to create a new class, call it reading image main colors, and then copy everything from here in your file that you made for reading image main, minus, of course, everything from the main down. Go ahead and paste it in there, and then follow the instructions in here. And so you're going to be working with color now. And finally, using the classes here, take a image that has multiple colors and run it through your file and send me that as well. I have had several turn it in already, so it can be done. But if you're having any questions on it, go ahead and shoot me an email or a message, and we will work through that. Are there any questions concerning this assignment? Okay, if there are no questions, then let's do some code. And that's, of course, where the fun stuff is. So I'm going to go ahead and open Eclipse. Let's go ahead and share that file or that screen. And let's go ahead and work on today's project. So we have been using the scanner class. Let's open up one of these. Well, open up one that has a scanner. Maybe this one has a scanner. No, it doesn't. Of course, none of these seem to have a scanner class, but we have been working on the scanner class. And that allows us to take data or information from the keyboard. It looks something like this. And of course, I'm going to get errors because I'm not actually in the right spot. But this creates our scanner class that allows us, or our scanner object using our scanner class, that allows us to take information from the keyboard and put it into our program. Well, that works great when we're working command line, but we don't want to stick with command line. We want to be able to start incorporating that into a GUI format where it looks nicer and it allows you to start developing applications. And our final group project will be a GUI application that you all will work on. So it's important that you begin to recognize what's going on. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and close these real quick so that we can start. As always, let's start with a new packet. Go to our source code, new. Go ahead and do a new package. And let's see, this is going to be, I believe we're on number 8. Good deal. Let's go ahead and create a new class in here. And we're going to call this first class JOption. And what JOption is, it is a pop-up style GUI. And the easiest way to see it is just to use it. So let's go ahead and move this and get started. Remember, if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot them across in the text box or send me an email later. All right. So the first thing that we want to do is when we're working with JOption, everything is a string. All input is a string. So we need to create a string, and our first string, we'll just call this FN, and you'll see why here in a minute, but we're calling this as an abbreviation for first number. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. We'll call this first number is equal to, now here we're going to use our JOption. So notice we are creating an object that is a string. Its name or variable is first number. JOption pane is going to be the pane that pops up. And once again, notice that we have all of these options here. And the one that we want is show input dialog, which is right here. And of course, this is going to be like using a system out to tell the user what to do. And so this is a new method of gaining data from the keyboard, from the user. So this is an interaction process. And so now we want to put our message, and we can just use enter your number. Let's say your first number. And go ahead and close it out the same as we're used. So we've created the object string, and its name is first number, and it uses this method. JOption pane, as you notice, dot, or has many different uses, lots of different preset API methods already. Now let's go ahead and grab another one. We'll call this one second number. Same thing, JOption. Now notice the J and the O must be capitalized, otherwise you will not, it will not work. Plain out simple. And the P also must be capitalized. And as soon as we hit the dot, we have the functions. Once again, we'll type in show, gets us closer to where we want, and we will enter second number. What did I put up here? Enter, oh no, enter your, we'll just kind of keep the same convention. And then we will semicolon. So now we have a method in which to pull two sets of numbers. However, remember earlier in the semester, we talked about that strings, you cannot add, subtract, you cannot do arithmetic functions on a string. So we do have to convert the string that we take from here. It has to be a string. You cannot do an integer or a double. And so we do need to convert it. Right now, we're just going to go ahead and convert it to an integer, and you can do that real nice and simple. You can say integer number 1, which corresponds to our first number here. And then we do integer, spell it out with a capital, dot parse. Now, parse is a method of gathering data and turning it into something. In this case, we want to parse the integer or the number that is in our first number. And so what that does is it takes a string, takes the number within that string, and turns it into an integer or an int. So we'll do the same thing with number 2 again. And if you notice, if you type in capital IN space, you'll get all of these options that are available to you. You can go ahead and come down here and then hit dot, and once again, you want parse. So if you're confused or you forget what something is called, type it in with the least amount of characters possible. Go ahead and hit the control space and start to cycle through, and you'll begin to notice what's available. And now, of course, now we want the second number here, and we'll go ahead again now with semicolon. And I did that twice in a row. Semicolon. So now we have taken our first number. We've told the user, enter your first number. We have declared a second string variable. We have told the user to enter their second number, and we have converted those using integer parse int into integers. So finally, we just have a couple of things left. This little program obviously is taking two numbers and adding them together, so we do need an integer. We'll call that sum. That is simply the sum of number 1 and number 2. And finally, we need to print it out. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. So once again, we use the J option, pane. Don't forget the pane, I like to. And now this time we want to show the message out. So the first one is input dialog. Now we want to show the message dialog. And notice we have two variables right here, two arguments actually. They're called an argument. And we have parent component and null, which automatically come highlighted. Null means it's not being put any particular place. For now, use null. The second is message. Now notice here we have message automatically highlighted. Now we can declare a string, and we could do that. We could simply say our string is, but for good programming, we like to keep things nice and clean. Let's go ahead and create a string variable and call that message, and let's type what we want. And so we'll say your sum is here. We'll put a semicolon, and now we can use our concatenation over here and go ahead and concatenate our message with the sum. So let's save that. Let's run it. Notice we get this input. You see input right here, which corresponds to the input right there. And where did it go? There it is. Actually, I'm just going to close that real quick and rerun it so you can see what's in the background here. All right, so enter your first number. So we'll say enter 12, tell it okay. We get another input, and notice that it keeps coming back right here. The null takes your screen and sticks it right in the middle. We'll enter a second number. We'll say 5. Your sum is 17. Okay, and it closes. So you can start to incorporate this if you would rather use the J option instead of the scanner class. Feel free to go ahead and use that. And you just have to remember that everything is a string, that the information that you type in, you then change the string using the parse. So now if you were taking a decimal or a float, here you would parse the double or parse the float and declare that a double or float to match. And of course, then you print it out. And this is nice and clean, very easy. Looks kind of nice. Let's run it one more time so you can see. Puts it right in the middle there. Try another number, 85. Hit OK. Put 58. Hit OK. And it prints out your total. And it goes away when it's done. So, are there any questions on this? Notice that the import, instead of the java.util.scanner class, is now javax.swing.jOptionPane. So this is the import needed of the API in order to give you the functionality of the JOptionPane. There are many others. There's JApplets, there's processing, there's thousands and thousands. And so part of it just depends on what you want to do, and that's where you use the Java API. You take the Java API, you do a search for what you're trying to find, and then it gives you all of the possibles. Take a minute after this, just go to the Java API and look up Java X Swing JOptionPane, and look at all of the options that you do have. All right. Well, we've created an option pane. Now we could also do, if you wanted, let's see here. Let's try one more. So let's say string name is equal to JOption. I always want to forget the pane. Now, once again, what do we want? We want input, right? So show input dialog, that's what we're looking for. And then we can say what, let's say, follow the same convention, enter your name. Oops. There we go. And so now the question becomes, how do we add the name in here? Well, remember your rules for concatenation. So we can say name plus, and so we can now save it and run. What is your name? My name is Zach. Okay, enter your first number, 25. My second number is 956. We'll go with that. Zach, your sum is. Now notice we did not put in a space for beautification. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Run it one more time. Enter your name. We're going to say, let's call it gold. Why not? Gold, your sum is. So we have now personalized it. And once you kind of get the feel for the JOptionPane, it's very simple to work with. There's only a few commands that you really need to notice. And notice here that since this was already a string, we didn't have to convert it like we did using the int, and we were directly able to push that data right back out. All right, if there's no questions on that, let's just go ahead and move along. So we want GUI applications, for instance. Let's move this over here. And let's go ahead and do our fancy annotation. Ooh, let's get one of these boxes. And let's go ahead and annotate. So this right here is a frame, a Jframe, a GUI application. And when you create your applications, of course, you want it to look nice, something like this. You want it to be easy to use and navigate, so you're going to have different functionality here. You're going to have buttons. That's what makes an application really work. the command line is nice, and for a lot of things, it's actually more efficient. However, as we know, most people like pretty. So let's look at pretty. So we're going to go ahead. We want to create a new class. And our new class, we're just going to call this one show window so that you can see what a window looks like. And we'll then kind of compare it. And even notice that the window that just popped up was very nice. And when we create our window, you're going to see that obviously this is written in Java, and it gives us that kind of functionality. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. One of them is we're going to introduce the final class. Now, final class deals with variables that are not changing. So those which are typically called a constant. And if you remember back to our naming conventions, we use all capitals for constants. So we'll go ahead and do final int. Actually, let's do int, and so you can see the alert that pops up. And we will go ahead and call this. Again, you want to get used to conventions. Like with scanner, I always use keyboard if it's a keyboard. If it's a microphone, I use microphone. Get used to your conventions. The first thing that you're going to use is declare the window size of your window. So we have window width, and for now we're just going to say 400. And then we will declare our window width, or our height, excuse me, and we'll just call that 300 for now. So notice that we're getting these alerts. Now these alerts, of course, are that it has not been used. So when we save it and run, notice we didn't get any errors, so it will run. However, if we were to then take input and call this class, this variable window width, we could change it. We do not want our users of our applications to be able to change that, at least not for now. We want that to be specific, and so we want to lock it. In essence, we want to stop the program from being changed, and we do that by using the final. And it is what it says. It's final. That is what it is. Now we have to incorporate a new object class, and it is called Jframe. Now, remember, I call it window. This would be the same as saying scanner keyboard is equal to new. So what do you think goes next? Okay, if you said Jframe, you were correct. This pattern repeats itself constantly and always in Java. So get used to it. Most often, if you see equals new, this is going to match this, with a few exceptions, but most of the time. Anytime you call a class and create an object, the object, of course, is a Jframe named window, you will follow this pattern. Notice it's turned red, so what do we do? That tells us we need to import. And notice that it imported javax.swing.jframe. So the Jframe and the JOption pane are part of the same API, that javax.swing. All right, so we have now instantiated a new Jframe, and from here we want to set a couple of things. Now, order matters, so get used to the process of order. And what we're going to do is we are working with our window object. So we will go ahead and say window dot. Notice again we have a large amount of options. First we want to set the title. And the title can be anything you want. We will call this CS187 show window. Just like on a web page, that title is what appears at the top. And of course, it's telling me, hey, you're missing a double quote. Good. Next, we want to set the size. Now, we have two options. Okay, so let's go ahead and do set size real quick. Notice it's right here. And let's look at it. Integer width and integer height. Notice it has to be an integer, which is important. And you do width first and then height. So we can go ahead and put that in here. And automatically our final pulls in there. So we can do width and we can go ahead and do height. Now, you may ask, well, what happens if we don't declare these variables? And we'll go over that, but you could put 400 and 300 in here. It's just not as clean, not as professional, because we want these easy to be found in case we need to change them. Granted, right here, we only have 21 lines of code, but imagine we had 10,000 and this was on row 6,000. Then you'd have to hunt where you can, by setting it up here, you can go right to all of your final integers are put together. You can go find it and make those changes quite simply. Now, the last thing we want to do is, well, not the last thing, excuse me. The next thing we want to do is we want it to close. And surprisingly, this is a big deal when dealing with GUI operations. If you do not put a default close, it will not close. You can click the X till you're red in the face. It will not go anywhere. So this is absolutely important. And it's set default close operation. And notice again, it puts us in the argument spot. Jframe dot, and this is what we want to close our Jframe, and we want it to exit on close. So you can go ahead and put that in there. Notice that Eclipse is trying to help us by giving us all the possible ideas that it can. Now, the drum roll. Actually, let's go ahead and run it real fast before we do that. Save, run, dun, dun, dun. Nothing has happened. Why is that? Well, we did not make it visible. So we have to do make or set it to be visible. And notice the inside is a Boolean and we want it to be true. Yes, visible, true. Now, when we save it and we run, dun, 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 we now have our nice little window. So with a little bit of imagination, of course, you can imagine a button here. We could pretend, let's go over here to our annotate button. Let's do it. So you could imagine a button here and maybe a button here that do something. And maybe you have a window over here that does something. You can begin to imagine what's going on. And that is your first Jframe. Now notice it is adjustable. So it's not locked in. It's not one size. What you've done here is you have determined the start size. So if we look back at the Zoom chat window, let's go ahead and run this again. So, oh, nope, run it again. And this time grab the window. So we can see that we're quite a bit smaller. So let's see if we can adjust it. Let's say we make this 600 by 500. Now notice we have the close on command. Bye-bye. Let's save that. Open it again. Oh, we're pretty close. So we're a little big now. We can close it. So you can begin to create or duplicate a window that you've already seen before. And notice how these sizes play. Well, that's pretty close. Just a tad bit too wide. But you can start to see how size is affected. Would the window thing we created show up in stuff like Task Manager? Well, that's a very good question. Let's see. Okay, so there is our CS187 show window. Let's go to Task Manager. which, notice, looks an awful lot like that. And let's see. I'm willing to bet that it's this right here. Let's go ahead and see what happens. Yes. So yes, it does. However, the title name is not on there. So if we run it one more time, but it does show up as a Java SE binary. Now we will eventually we'll get to the point where we change the actual application name so it would show up like Eclipse or any of these others. But that's a great question, and I had never thought of it, and now we both know. Go ahead and close that. We'll close that, and we have created our. Let's see, I don't need that anymore. We can drag this back out of the way. All right. Are there any more questions on that? Oops, that's not the button I wanted. All right. Okay, well, we're making good time. Let's go ahead and do a more complicated version. And this is what you will most likely use. It will be up to you as a team to determine, but most likely you will probably use the Jframe with what's called a flow layout. Now, a flow layout means that it flows and it gives you a lot of commands. In fact, so let's go ahead. Let me look at this real quick since we're doing good on time. Let's go to Java API. Go run over here. So obviously here's all of our AWT. We can incorporate those. But let's see here. We want the Java X, so this is where we're working. Notice all of the available features. There's lots of image, lots of cryptography, language management. There's a whole bunch in Java X. This entire swing, XML, go on and on and on. And what were we going to look for? We wanted to look for flow layout. So it's Java X AWT, and I guess we have to go here real quick. Where is my search command? Interesting. Okay, so here is we're in the Java AWT. Here's our interface summary. These are our interface functions. Here's our class summary. And what we're looking for is flow layout. And with our flow layout, these are our fields, static int, that begins to tell us our center, leading, left, right, and trailing. Those are directions, basically, that we're giving it. These are the methods that we have available to us, as well as all of our layout functions. And most likely, this is where you guys will spend a lot of time with your final project. So go ahead and make a note of that if you like. It's a class flowout. Oh, that's right. It's under the language object Java AWT flowout right there. And now you also tend to bring in the layout manager that provides with even more layout options. And then there's the layout manager 2, which can even allow you to get much more specific component, get maximum size, layout sizes, and that. So take a minute, go ahead and look at those. You will find a lot of goodies. And let's go ahead and create one. So let's go ahead and make a new class. And this class we will call Flow Window. And we're going to be introduced to a couple of new concepts that you have not seen. Don't let them freak you out. You will get used to them. The first one is called extends. Extends means just that. It extends what's available to something else. And what we want to extend in our public class here is Jframe. I don't want to confuse you too much on that. You will come across it in the book, but just concern yourself with the fact that it extends or gives you more of the functionality that's available. And it is simply extends, and we want to extend Jframe. Notice we're getting our red line already. It's saying, hey, we need to import Jframe. Now we're doing good. Now you're going to be introduced to a new concept, and it's kind of confusing at first. So we have always worked with our public static void main method at the top, and we did everything inside that. Well, we don't always have to. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move that down just a little bit and give us some working room. And the first thing that we want to do, just like we did on our show window, is we want to declare our sizes. So let's go ahead and do that in a similar method, and you're going to be introduced one more. Instead of the public, which is just that, public is available to everything, we want this to be private, the same way that we made it final and int. And we're still going to go ahead and create our constants, and that would be window width again, when we'll just set this to say 250 for now. And once again, we will create one for private int equal to, and this is going to, oops, what am I doing? Sorry about that, guys. We don't need into there. There we go. Notice it turns blue when it's done. When it creates a constant, makes it easier to find. Height, and we're going to set this, say, just to 200. That'll give us something to work with. Okay. So this private right here is the other to public. And so we could actually break this down. That is private, which means it can only be used inside this frame or this group. You can't call it from another class on another tab, in essence. It's final. It's not going to change. It's an integer, and then our variable name is a constant, therefore all caps using the underscore, and we set our size. Now, we're going to go ahead and create another public. That needs to be lowercase. Another public, but this time it's not a static void, it's not main, it's just a public class in essence. But we're not calling it a class like we did up here. Okay, this is just a public method, and we will call this flow window. In your next chapter, you're going to start writing methods of your own. And this method of writing methods is the standard. It's what you will start to use all the time. So don't freak out. And we can have as many public in here that we want. Typically, when you are creating an inline program like this, all the methods are first, well, second, all your private variables, then your public methods, and then finally the last thing on there is your main class. Okay. Extend replaces the string command. It doesn't replace it. Notice it's still here. It's right here. What it does is it allows us, if you imagine this public class here, from this curly brace to this curly brace, is the outside of the box. Then our public static void inside is just a segment of that box. Maybe it's the toy. All of the rest of this may be the styrofoam and the instructions and other things. What this does, it extends Jframe to everything inside that box. Okay, and so that is what we're doing. We want Jframes to work everywhere because we're starting to work outside of the public static void main down here. This method down here, we're working outside of it, so we want to extend this everywhere. Did that answer your question? All right, while I'm waiting on a response on that, we're going to go ahead and continue here. So we're creating a new public method. Well, let's see here. Anything under public static void will technically be in the box. Absolutely. This is inside the box, and you can use that. Notice this curly brace goes to here. And if you kind of think about it, if you're familiar with HTML, let's look at that. So if you have HTML, for instance, you have HTML here, and then you have to close that HTML down here on the end. And then inside that HTML package, you have your head, and then you may have your body down here, but everything is within the HTML packet or the HTML umbrella, however you want to look at it. So this HTML and this HTML that encompass everything is the same as this curly bracket and this one. It has to be first and last. And so by extending the Jframes here, we extend it to everything within inside it. It's allowing everything to use those Jframes. Okay. It will extend through the whole project that's on this page. If you were calling classes from another page that also needed Jframe, you would have to put it there as well. But basically everything that's on this page, it's there. Okay, so our flow window, the first thing again that we have to do, if you go back over here, is what? Set our title. Now, we're going to set a title. Now, because we have extended Jframe, here we had to declare it, our window. We created our Jframe object, our window variable, and then we used it at the beginning. Because we have extended it, extended Jframe, that's hard to say fast, we no longer have to use that window tab like we did before. We can just go ahead and say set title. And let's go ahead and name this. We will call this CS187 flow window and use our semicolon. So if we look at our two projects, if we go back over here, we had set title. Here we have set title, but we have extended and we are outside of here, so we can extend that Jframe and we no longer need the window dot. Saves you a little bit of time, it's a little bit cleaner, and it allows you a little bit more control. So first we do our title. What's the next thing that we do? We set our size. So we do the same thing over here. Set size. Now, the one thing that you will be missing, of course, is some of the help. It's still available under control space, but it doesn't pop up as much. So set size, width, and height. So we can go ahead and click that if you want. And obviously it's already there. And so we can go ahead and do window width, comma, window control space, and there's our height. And let's go ahead and terminate that line with our semicolon. Next, what did we do? Let's look over here. Exit on close. So what do you think we're going to do over here? Set default. And if you can't remember what it's called because it's set default close operation, go ahead and pop that right there because you know it's a set default. What's the operation? Well, we want, and you can come down if you really want to hunt for it, but we're just going to say, what do we want to close? And we want to close Jframe. And then what do we want it to do? We want it to exit on close, or exit when we hit the red button, the little red X. So let's look over here. What did we do next? So next we went ahead and did the set visible to true. Now, this is where it gets a little different. Remember when we were talking about mandatory? You have to have in every program, not on every page of classes, but in every program, you have to have public static void main, string, box, args, curly brace, one time. That's all you have, it is one time, but you do have to have it there. And so this is now where we are going to invoke our flow window, which you'll see here in a minute, which is really nice and simple. But here, we do want it to be true, visible to true, but we have other things we want to put in there. And so visible true will be down at the end. So we can say set visible. Remember, hit your control space if you're confused. And what is that? Visible is what? True. So if we run it, if we save it and run it, look what happens. Nothing. The reason for that is we have to have something in here that is still controlling. Now you could put a lot in here, but typically you're only going to put one thing. New, and in this case, flow window is what we want, because that's where all of our Jframe information is at. And so we can say window, parentheses, here. So what happens is, the only thing Java is looking for is this. It wants this. It's going to come to our void main. It's going to come down. It's going to say new. Okay, so that means do something new. Flow window. Then it's going to come up here and say public, flow window. Do everything that's inside here. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. And notice we have a window. See it right? Why does it do that? Okay, so we now have our CS flow window. First off, we don't have enough room for the name, so we should make it wider. So let's do that real quick, just so we can see what's going on in there. Let's save it and run it one more time. Now notice we did not give it a coordinate system on where to open. And because we did not, it'll always open in the top corner. We can set it to null like we did before, which will put it about right there. We could also set coordinates to say we want it to open here or here. And when you start your final project, you'll work with that, and that'll be something that you guys can decide as a team, where do we want it to open? All right. So notice that with a couple of differences, it's identical to this right here. The differences are we extended Jframe. The only thing we have in our public static void main is calling this method right here. And we've added just a couple of differences. We have our private and two publics. Okay, let's see here. Looking at it from an HTML point of view, but the extend command is practically a CSS styling, kind of saving you the trouble. That is true. It does kind of work like a styling. A CSS styling. It does allow you to make reduce what you have to do on the page while expanding your availability to control it. So yeah, that's a pretty good approximation. Okay, but what we want to do is we want to do something. We want to add something to it, right? We want to have buttons, we want to have input. I mean, that's a pretty cool box, but I don't think it's going to impress anybody. So the next thing that we want to do is we've set our title, we've set our size, we have set our exit on close. Now let's go ahead and start our layout. Notice we can hit Control Shift, and we want our layout. Now our layout is based on this new flow window every time. Now let's look at it. We talked about null earlier, so let's see what null does. When you notice, you don't see any difference, so it would be easy to click null, but we do want it to do something, and in this case we want it to create a new window. And so we can go ahead and put that right here, minus that, of course. And notice now we're getting another red line. And the red line, it tells us it wants to do something, right? We'll go ahead and come back to that in a minute. Well, let's see, we can save it a minute. And we get an error down here, and it doesn't know, it's not applicable for the arguments here. And part of the problem is that we still have a bunch of stuff that needs to be input. So we'll go ahead and leave that for a moment, and then we'll come back and clean it up. Okay, let's go ahead and put in some buttons. So a button is clickable, and it's called JButton. Now we're going to name it. We'll call it button 1 equals new. What do you think goes here? If you said JButton, you're right. Now inside the parentheses we create an argument, and here we can just name it. And all we did was we created a new object. It's a JButton, and it's called button. And now we want to add that button to our layout. And so that it has been added to our layout. So let's go ahead and highlight this real quick. Let's import that. We're still getting one up here. And it's not giving us an import, but ultimately we do have a couple of more imports that we do need. We can go ahead and import java.awt, and we also need a import, well, because it's not giving us the flow window yet. All right, so we do need to go ahead and import java.awt again, this time, oops, with our flow layout. And it's still wanting to, we haven't added everything to our program yet. So let's go ahead and comment that out for now. And notice that we now have a Windows style. If you were on a Mac, it would be a Mac style window with one button in the middle. Of course, it doesn't do anything right now. We haven't created the functionality for that. And this layout, we do need to do a couple more things to it, but you can begin to see that we have more windows. So let's go ahead, more functionality. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's just go ahead and call this 2, 3, 4, wow. Call this 2, 3, 4. And let's go ahead and add those. Because if you notice, Control C, if we run it right now, save and run, we only have one button. because we haven't added any more buttons to our window. So now, even though we have created 4 objects, how many buttons are we going to have on there? Notice we just have button 2. And this is the next step of creating, and this is where we need this flow layout. And so I think that for time-wise, we've been going an hour now. This is a good stopping spot. We will pick this up next week in our code and chat and go ahead and finish this where we have some buttons that will do something, and we'll figure out what they're going to do next week. So let's go ahead and save it. Are there any questions pertaining to this? Obviously, this is new, so don't be terribly concerned with that aspect. Next week, you will be creating methods like this right here outside of the main method. And I believe in the following week, you're going to start working with the Jframes. However, I wanted you to kind of see it so that next week when I go ahead and open the final project, you will be more familiar with what's available, and it'll help in your research getting started. What command was it that organized your stuff? Oh, okay, well, let's do this. Yeah. Let's go ahead. So if you hit Control space F, it makes it all pretty. That's not Control space, sorry. Control Shift F. Control Shift F. Once again, I like doing it. It's just kind of fun. Control. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And that's Control Shift F. Are there any other questions? All righty. Oh, I see Michelle came in. Hello, Michelle. Monday, I will be submitting to everyone your final project. It does require communication with each other. It is a group project. The grading will be individual as well as group effort. So if you have somebody that's not carrying their weight, then they will be deducted, but it will not affect everybody else's grade. I think that teamwork is absolutely fundamental. However, I'm not going to make everybody suffer if somebody isn't carrying their own weight. So go ahead and let that sigh of relief go. If you do what you need to do, the project, your grade will be reflected upon your effort. I will release that on Monday. It will not be due, obviously, until the second week in May, so you'll have about 6 weeks to be able to coordinate with each other. I'm setting up a couple of different instruments that will allow you to communicate, both the Zoom. Everybody can get Zoom. I'm setting up a couple of folders that will allow you to communicate. And I'm also going to set up a discussion board that allows for everybody to post their questions. And I will watch that and provide input as well. But it's important to understand that programming is a group venture in the real world. And honestly, if I had my choice, I would have started group projects from day one. It just tends to mess everything up as far as how we're usually working. But group projects are vital because it teaches you to work with others, and that's absolutely fundamental. And that's the way it works. Google has 30,000 engineers and teams of some of them up to 20, and they may work on only one small component where there's a dozen different teams that are doing other things. So if there's no more questions, I appreciate everybody stopping by. If you have any questions, don't forget to email me, Zoom me, contact me through Canvas, and I will help you every way that I can. Otherwise, thank you for showing up, and I will see you next week. Give it just a minute in case there's any last-minute messages that pop through. All right. Thanks, Michelle. We will see everybody next week. Have a good day. I'm stopping.